Hey everyone, I'm here today with Simon Torring. Simon is the head of omnichannel at Sephora. He was an early employee at e-commerce cosmetic startup Luxola, seeing its growth from a tiny startup to its acquisition by LVMH in 2015. Simon, how are you doing today?
Hi, very good. It's busy week, busy week. How about you, Dave?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to talk to you because I've known you for a couple of years now, and I've seen how your work has changed from early marketing to the e-commerce, from the e-commerce startup, all the way now to Sephora, where you're doing all sorts of crazy stuff that we were just talking about. But I'd like to focus on those early days, at least in the first part of our conversation. So maybe you can just give us a recap of what Luxola was, what you were doing, and how it ended up merging into Sephora today.
Absolutely. So, Luxola was founded all the way back in late 2011 by our founder, Alexis, who is still here with us today, leading Sephora Digital today. A pure play beauty e-commerce, founded in Singapore and operating all over Southeast Asia. So the idea from then very much was that you had a huge demand across the Southeast Asia region for cult beauty brands, cult skincare brands, up and coming trendy brands that didn't really have a home anywhere. So when we went and spoke to brands, the response was very much, oh, we're from the US or the UK or Australia, Southeast Asia is far away, trade barriers are high, we
Yeah.
don't really know how to operate. We say, no worries, guys, import into Singapore and we will handle everything for you. So I joined in sort of mid 2013 when I think we were probably sort of a dozen people um, operating, I think 9 or 10 markets across the region, and we're really growing fast. That I think that's really when the revenue growth started happening. I came in just after we had closed our Series A. We then proceeded to raise a Series B in I think 2000, sort of mid late 2014, and then finally we were acquired by LVMH and Sephora Asia in the middle of 2015.
Cool. So one of the things I remember from when I first met you was that your title was head of special projects. It was
Yeah.
the most nebulous, ambiguous term. But what exactly were you doing in those early days?
Yeah, so I joined Luxola after having worked with a VC in Malaysia that had an internal marketing agency serving both the portfolio companies and certain other sort of select clients. So we were working with all sorts of corporates and then had this little startup called Luxola that we were working a little bit for as well. So I started actually working with Luxola on just SEO and content marketing. And for the first at least 6 months, that was really what I was focusing on. So I built sort of the early foundation pillars in, let's say, influencer marketing, SEO, content marketing. And then the special projects component was essentially, I started getting slightly bored after, I think, 6 months and asked around in the organization where I could help out with other types of projects. So I helped out a little bit with our loyalty program. When we were acquired, I ended up driving that sort of PMO process for a while. I was running Indonesia for a year. I've been doing all sorts of weird things, but all under this umbrella of head of special projects, which I would say sort of what is the biggest fire right now? Going figure out how
And
to
send
deal with
Simon
that.
in to do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
so when you joined Luxola, they already had some traction. It was already happening in some way. And then what would you say was the things that really accelerated its growth? So you mentioned a bunch of stuff there, influencer marketing, SEO, content. What
Yeah.
were like the keys to really to push that chart that goes from like here to like here? What were you working on?
Yeah, so at least first of all, just to set the scene for everybody who is listening or watching, I would say that there was actually a fairly long period of time where growth was really really hard. So it like despite the fact that we were fairly focused, despite the fact that we were doing all sorts of things, and despite the fact that we had a lot of resources, it really took a while for us to find that right fit. For us, it was a matter of on the merchandising side getting the right brands, and then the marketing side being able to activate that and put it in front of the right customers. So I think if we take the, let's say, non-paid marketing channels first, which is the stuff that I worked the most on, it was really a matter of establishing a few platforms and then making a ton of experiments sort of within a few key pillars. So I can walk through a few. So um, when I came in, SEO was essentially a bit of an afterthought. We were at the level where we knew how much traffic are we getting from Google Analytics organic channel. It was right around the time when Google was starting to take away the keyword level traffic data. So the intelligence level was actually decreasing rather than increasing. So I would say the first month or two, I was really just focused on sort of setting the right reporting formats and the right foundation for finding out where we were. So that means essentially making sure that we use our Ahrefs account to look at our gradual increase in inbound links, figuring out where we're getting links from, where we're getting mentions without links that we could start actioning on. We were using a product called Stat to do a large-scale rank tracking across all of our markets. So as a basis, we were essentially tracking our brand and category and Luxola brand name rankings in all the different languages across all of the markets where we operated. So we used that essentially as the starting point.
Okay, so let me stop you there. There's a lot of stuff that you just said that I want to make sure that I'm capturing. So one of the first things you did, you looked at SEO because that was probably one of the most important channels. And you established a really good foundation for reporting around that. And there were a couple tools that you mentioned, so Ahrefs, and the other one was called Stat.
Stat, S-T-A-T. I'm not sure if it's around anymore. I remember back then it was a huge decision for us because it was like several $100s a month. And I really had to get buy-in all the way from the top that there was a worthy investment.
Yeah.
Now we are sort of at a bit of a different level.
Yeah.
But what that allowed me to do was sort of just large scale listening to the ranking progression, not of specific keywords, but of sort of specific sets of keywords. So we were managing, let's say, our cluster of brand pages as one combined unit, all of our category pages, and then all of our special landing pages against, let's say, holidays and things like that.
Yeah.
So the idea there was that we could essentially run sort of sprints where for 3 months we were focusing on just what can we do with our brand pages, then what can we do with our category pages, what can we do with our product pages, and so on. Because from a tech perspective, all of these pages are essentially the same e-commerce template.
Yep.
So the idea there was that since so much of the technical on-page SEO had to be executed, all the improvements have to be executed by the tech team. It made more sense for us to sort of focus on these templates in a sense.
Got it. Yep.
So I remember for the longest time we were like really just, you look at all of your brands. We looked at essentially both the keyword, both the search volumes in the different countries, but also the conversion probability on our site. A little bit of things like, do we have these brands exclusively? Do we think that they're trending up? Do we think that they're trending down, and so forth? And as we were doing that, just as a little anecdote, we actually started to use a little bit of the same philosophy to start feeding intelligence back to the merchandising team on which up-and-coming brands and trends to react to.
Okay.
So I remember that was a big deal, and that reporting, I believe, actually continues till today on our SEO team.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing that people should definitely take away from at least that one part is one thing that's going to take you from the level you're at now to the next level is just getting all that tracking in place, because it's going to allow you to run experiments. It's going to allow you to see what's working and what's not. And you can't really get to that next level and scale up if you don't have those systems in place. Okay, so that's search. And then after that, what did you work on?
Yeah, so absolutely, because I think what really frustrated me a little bit in the beginning was that we would have extremely busy, packed weeks. And then when I went home from the office on Friday, I remember sort of walking to the bus and asking myself, was this a very productive week, or was this a not very productive week? And not really having any metrics to side of judge, did I do a good job or not? Because, we could be raising funding or not, and we could have crises or not. But at the end of the day, I think it's quite important also to manage your own motivation. And I think that's why it was so important for me, first in SEO, but then when I later built influencer marketing, content, production, all these different teams, essentially putting in place the same frequency and granularity of reporting, which we now have in all of those areas. Yeah.
Cool. So SEO, you got that in place, and then presumably that just improved over time because you had a short feedback loop and you were able to run experiments on that. And so that you got that right. And then you also mentioned about influencer marketing. So what did that look like?
Yeah. So I think there's all the trinity is really the pure SEO work, then the influencer marketing and the content. So touching upon influencer marketing, I think this probably a bit cynically sprung from the need to get more links. Okay. And I think back then what we started to see is that the page views are moving towards blogs. This was sort of before Instagram was a huge thing. This was before back then, like, the blogs were really the main platform for most of the influencers. The problem was that when we started reaching out to them, it was what I got back basically looked to me like an imperfect market, a very, very imperfect market. Like, you had wildly popular influencers that were very cheap. You had small reach influencers that were very expensive. You had different sets of prices and different like beauty bloggers, pure play makeup artists, fashion bloggers, all these different things. So I think the first thing we really did was we started to look at essentially per market indexing. I think we had something like 500 to 600 influencers in each market. We would index them in a big Google sheet.
Okay.
And we used, I'm sorry, the name escapes me. We used a plugin that I know is not on the market anymore. So you'd have to code something custom if you want the same to real-time fetch their similar web monthly
awesome.
visits, their latest pull from Facebook on likes, Twitter followers, Instagram followers. So what we did is we assigned a weight to each of these factors. So web visits, I weight very highly. Facebook likes, I weight very lowly because it's quite easy to get blood for no money. And we basically used that to create an influencer score. So that was indexed against all of the influencers in that particular market. So we essentially got a ranking of let's say relative size or relative reach in terms of our business goals for each market. So, and after that, it was really just a piece of work about reaching out to these people and getting prices for comparable services like blog posts or whatever. And then we could look at the best opportunities and who we should work with.
How did you get the list of 500 influencers?
That's just work. Like that's just pure work. So I think it came down to reaching out to the different like blogger associations. I remember sitting and just like literally searching for Singapore beauty blog, Malaysia beauty blog, whatever, following all the comments. That's usually where I remember all the up and coming bloggers would sort of be commenting on the established bloggers' comment fields. To try and get a little plug there. It was just pure hustle. It was really just getting that.
I think that ties back into your first point as well. So the first thing you did, you looked at a new channel and you're like, how can I establish metrics for this? So I know. So I think there's a common theme to all of this, right? And somebody watching this might be thinking, hey, that's great that Simon did that for blogs. Do you think a strategy like that could work for Instagram, YouTube now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it sounds like a huge piece of work. But what I think it comes down to is finding 2 or 3 metrics that are really helpful to you in driving decisions, and then just tracking them really ferociously. And it's got to be weekly. You got to get on that loop. You got to be super disciplined about it.
Yeah.
I came to a point where it took me maybe like 3 or 4 hours a week to do all this analysis, and then I could spend the rest of the time taking decisions from it.
Yeah.
But I would never ever start a new project or a new channel or anything like that without, like, this would always be step 1. Establishing that set of metrics and the reporting suite would always be step 1. Because at the end of the day, no matter if you are running your own business, where you got to evaluate budgeting opportunities, or whether you have bosses that are going to release resources, whether human resources or money to you, they speak a financial language. So you got to bring stuff to them in that way. I think in a startup, you are hustling for resources, and you know what you want to do. You at the most of the time, you know how you want to execute. I think rather it's typically a struggle about getting the right buy-in, and that's what this whole reporting suite allows you to do as well.
Yeah. So you have the list of influencers, you have the sheet of indexing them. So how do you actually action off that? So you just look at the best combination of reach and price, and then you reach out to them, and that's it?
That's it. I think, and it was very helpful for getting good deals with the larger influencers. But what it also proved to us was that we were not just tracking this statically. We were also tracking the trend of how these different influencers were moving. And what I think we started to realize was that there were certain ways of starting to predict who was going to be big. I think, and it really comes down to first some sort of, let's say, the quantitative stats that we had in this overview. But then you start looking at things like, what is their posting frequency? Are they disciplined about how they do that? Are they consistently responding to their followers? Are they posting across social media? Are they responding quickly when you reach out? And are they cordial? And are they easy to work with? That turned out to be a huge predictor in their future success. Because I think today they are like powerhouses. They are essentially their own businesses. Yeah. And I think back then we had a good way of basically picking the winners in some sense. So I think now it's much more established what we do, and I think we have an amazing brand name to leverage in promoting influencers as well. But back then, I remember a lot of the people who were very big, especially in Singapore back then, were super tiny, and we were probably some of the first companies that were reaching out to them to actually work with them and take them seriously.
And so you're able to get them for cheap, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think in the end, in the end, cheap makes it sound like it's just like a paid marketing campaign. I think they had amazing value for also building the Luxola brand. We tried to with the influencers that we engaged the first time. We would of course look at evaluating the results, but then I think we tried to with certain influencers make a deeper integration with the company. So we would do curated influencer sets on merchandising. So you go and buy your favorite influencers makeup kit from our website. We would start having recurring influencers that appeared in our YouTube videos and things like that. So we really saw them as like friends, but of course friends that have to be remunerated for the value that they add.
Right. So it wasn't just purely this is the CPM for this influencer. It's like what is the engagement they bring? What's the brand halo effect that they bring to Luxola, to our brand?
And it was definitely a bit hard for me because I brought this sort of numbers first approach to it, but very quickly realized that it is in the end an outreach game, and you gotta just be a good partner. So I think we learned also that.
Yeah. So final question about that is you mentioned outreach. So you have this list of people. Do you have a sense of like the conversion rate? So you'd reach out to 100 influencers. I mean, are 50 of them going to get back to you, or is 10?
Yeah, so I think what we tried to do was that we would not reach out to that many, but the ones who we reached out to, we would try and do it very well. So whether it's I think in a lot of these things, what separates the good from the great is 10 minutes of research. So I think in the end, you can have the greatest template in the world, but if you find out that somebody, if you can find some context on a person and really just try and help them for a few emails back and forth, I'm totally okay with having, let's say, a month delay on engaging them. If I can make sure that they see me as somebody who is not like, that guy from the blogger advertising network or that guy from the big corporate. If we can find a way to be more flexible, I mean, we've done all sorts of things. We've helped these people, even before we work with them, we've helped them get in touch with guys like Google for different events.
Yeah.
I remember we've given tech help. How do you build your website to certain bloggers? We've managed to, introduce them to other influencers in different markets to learn from.
Yeah.
We did events that they could come to and learn about how to do Google Analytics. We were just trying to be good for that ecosystem, and I think that carried with it a lot of benefit long term.
Yeah, genuinely building the relationship, not just viewing it transactionally.
Absolutely.
That was one of the keys to that. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the summit so far. If you're watching the summit, I'm guessing it's because you're looking for new ideas to grow your store, right? Well, if that's you, come check out what we're doing at Referral Candy. What we do is we help stores grow by adding a refer a friend program to your store. So how it works is you hook us up, we'll give your customers their own personal referral links and help you reward those customers when they refer new customers to your store. Very simple, very powerful, especially for those of you who've already got an email list and a steady order volume every month. If you want to check us out, we've got a 30-day risk-free trial. Plans start at $25 a month. And if you click the link below, we'll give you a $50 credit to get started. You don't need any developer skills to get started, especially if you're on Shopify, you can do it yourself. But if you have any questions, you can email me at david@referralcandy.com. Tell me you're from the summit and I will help you out. All right, that's it. Let's get back to the show. Okay, cool. Then you also mentioned content marketing. So what does that look like and this is a beauty brand. And I'm guessing were you the one writing the content, or how did you start thinking about that?
So it was the insight that sprung from that all this content marketing started with was really that going back to the way that we were measuring the SEO progress on stat by looking at brand pages as one cluster, category pages as another cluster, and so forth. I think what we quickly realized that there is only so much search volume to capture within those terms, and hence so much potential traffic, and that there was an amazing array of search terms lying around that we could vie for, ranking for, but that there was no good home on our website for content that would have a fair chance of ranking for those things.
Okay.
So actually what I did was we had a blog called LX Edit. So back then it was Luxola, where everything was LX something something. So LX Edit was like a blogspot blog. I think it had been updated by an intern once. It was very here and there. So I believe it was over in a weekend. I bought a premium theme on ThemeForest, bought the .com domain, and I set up lxedit.com. So what I did was, I think on Monday showed it to our CEO. She loved it. Got the mandate to spend a little bit of money on content, and then we just moved forward fast.
What's a little bit of money?
A little bit of money was maybe $1,000 a month or something like that.
Yeah.
and I think this is for a company that had like, let's say 50 employees. So it's not, we probably had a little bit less back then. We probably had 30 employees back then. So it was not like a huge amount of money. And I knew that I had to, the first insight was I knew that the distribution of traffic would probably not be linear against my content. There would probably be certain pieces that would stand out.
Right.
What was standing between me and making those pieces is the knowledge of what they should be about and
Right.
which format.
What you're talking about is the 80-20 power law. Yeah. Okay.
And actually what we saw was more than 95-5 power law later on in the game. But what I did was really, I went on like Freelancer, Elance, all these portals, and I essentially went pretty sort of openly to a lot of writers and said, look, I would love to feature you here. I can pay you a little bit. And then I will very happily be fully transparent about the performance of your work. And as it works out, we can then perhaps work together in a bigger way. So the outcome was that I think in the first 3 months or something like that, we probably published content from close to 100 different writers.
Wow.
We started to branch out and do both English and Thai and Indonesian for languages.
So you're one person managing 100 writers?
Yeah.
How? Giant spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly.
No way around it. It's just do the work.
And, you find a way to give them direct access onto your platform. Like, to be honest, there was no editing.
Yeah.
There was no sort of due diligence or compliance on the format of these posts. It was just like raw content, get out there.
That was my next question. Is there's no editorial strategy? I'm guessing you didn't manually look at each post and be like, no, this is not the beauty tip that we should be sharing. It's like, I don't care. I just want to get words on the website. That's essentially strategy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And like, given, like, if we had tried to do this today at Sephora, it would not have lasted a second because we protect and cherish our brand so much. Back then, it was like, I was really just driven by getting more organic traffic. Like, that was the only thing I had in sight.
Okay.
So what we started to do was we would essentially look at, after a few months, you would typically see that the rankings for a certain piece of content would tend to stabilize. So this is when we can start looking at what is the traffic potential of this piece. So we started doing a few different things. So we would look at basically what, like, I remember we essentially looked at the URL of the piece, the traffic that it has gotten to date, the traffic it has gotten to date divided by the number of days it has been up past let's say 90. So like in a solid sort of a post growth ranking, find your ranking level state, how much traffic is it generating? And then we just look at like how many factors can we get in those columns out there. So like we would look at what is the word count, who is the author, what is the topic, what's the sentiment of the article. I think we had probably something close to 30 or 40 different factors effectively, and we would then look at what are the correlations between these. So what are the things that tend to drive a higher amount of traffic? And that would then feed very rigorously into which pieces do we commission extensions for, which authors do we continue working with and pay more. And over time, it helped also drive, let's say, the editorial voice of LX Edit. So over time, we started pruning more all of this raw content and essentially getting to a place where it was a much more clean platform.
Right. When you say pruning, that's just straight up deleting or doing redirects?
Yeah, a lot of redirects. Because God knows there was a lot of bad writing on that website, and that's all my fault. But it was a price I was happy to pay because we really just needed to get a compass for what works.
So your strategy there was, let's first of all set up tracking as the other things. Let's just be aggressive and just put a ton of content out there and then see what works and what doesn't. And then let's reverse engineer what has worked and just do more of those. That was strategy.
Yeah, and again, like I have, I didn't even really have high school math because I was busy doing other stuff. So it's not advanced statistics in any way. It's really just like you can use 2 or 3 free crawler tools on the website for this, on the web for these things. Get the traffic, get potentially the referral traffic to the website so you can get a bit closer to the e-commerce conversion point or conversion power of this content. And then just look at like whatever else can I find out about this content. So again, I think it's one of those, like, it's not fun work, but a lot can be achieved if you just spend like a Friday night or a Thursday night gathering a lot of information on each piece.
how did you get traffic to each post? So, a lot of people have had the experience of writing something, publishing
Yeah,
a post, and then like it gets no traffic. So if
yeah.
you're doing this over and over, 100 writers, how did you make sure that, was there a backlink strategy involved? Did you like boost these on Facebook? What did that?
No, none. So it operated completely because we had no budget for promoting this content, and we couldn't even get social mentions for it. Like we couldn't even get our social team to post them. Like there was nothing. So it was all organic traffic. And I think like it's really that 95/5 rule
Mm-hmm.
that first you need to let it sit a little bit. I think it took a couple months before we started seeing basically any results. And then after that, like you'll just see some piece of content are spiking like crazy, and the really good stuff tends to sort of start living a life of its own. So maybe like a couple of things I think we realized of the content that was very popular is that it tended to be very long form. It tended to be fairly evergreen in nature.
Hmm.
It tended to be written by the same authors, which means that we kept working with them, of course. And it tended to be, let's say, it tended to be fairly informative. So I remember when we started formalizing the content creation guidelines, one of the things that we started focusing on a lot is that you can write about any topic, but make sure that the resource you write could be perceived as an exhaustive sort of base of knowledge on this particular subject. If somebody comes in with no knowledge about Korean beauty, what is all the stuff that you can teach them about Korean beauty? And so we would see some of these articles literally like after, again, 2-3 months when the rankings started sort of settling, we would see certain pieces of content getting, 10,000 hits a month, something like that. So fairly quickly, the LX Edit platform across Indonesia, Thailand, and the English version went from a level of around 30,000 sessions a month to 50 to 70 to about 100,000, which was not that far from actually our full e-commerce traffic at some point, right?
Mm-hmm. And then you were making sure that the pieces of content were leading to traffic on Luxola and that it was actually converting.
Yeah, but again, like that sort of went afterwards because it was such a chaotic process of just getting all the content up. I must admit that I just looked at what are the pieces that start getting traffic, and then I would then go back and, let's say, edit them a little bit more and make sure that we have banners pointing to the site and so forth.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What about things that didn't work out? Any things that you guys tried that were like, okay, so we've heard about influencer marketing, SEO content, so those are the things that helped you drive growth. Were there any experiments that you ran that were like, okay, that totally, we should not do that, and let's move on to something else?
Oh yeah, we've made many, many, many mistakes. I think on LX Edit in particular, I think had I known today where the company was moving towards and how important branding would be, we would probably not have made the trade-off.
Trade-off meaning?
The trade-off of speed versus, let's say, craft.
Okay.
We would have slowed it down and tried to see could we get that intelligence about what piece of content would work from other places, because it was fairly messy.
Were you getting any pushback from your bosses about that? It's like, hey, Simon, great job with Google Analytics, hockey stick traffic, but what the hell are you publishing?
Yeah, sometimes, and like when I think back to that, I'm actually getting a little bit sort of like, I'm getting a bit emotional because I seem to remember my reaction back then was always like, oh shit, okay, I'll just remove that post and then I'll do 10 new. Whereas today I would probably be more like, okay, shit, we conceptually we cannot do this. It would happen again. Let's find a way that is less risky. But back then it was really just, oh yeah, okay. Oh, you don't like this post? Okay, I'll delete that post. Fair enough. Yeah. Maybe if it's getting some content, I'll just hide it away from you.
Right. So you were addressing just the symptom, like the top level. Oh, that post in particular is bad. But don't worry, there's 20 more coming using the same process. And so
Absolutely.
That was it.
Absolutely. And I think on a much more macro scale, what I think maybe not a mistake, but something we would have done maybe a bit different, is that this is the level of, like, this was the working model for the non-performance marketing. So this is all the marketing that is typically creative-driven, branding-driven. That was me. And if you can imagine a much more rigorous approach to the performance marketing, we essentially ended up with a marketing team that was amazing at scaling, amazing at just, power. But we also ended up in a spot where we would have workshops on branding that were absolutely horrid. Like, we would bring together the company, like 15 people, define a new brand for Luxola, and we would end up with like the most terrible concept ever, because it just had no kind of home for us. It was everything was like it can be quantified,
Right.
and I think we struggled with that later on when we then inevitably at a much larger scale had to find ways to like how do you attribute branding. Then we suddenly have the problem we can never do something creative because there's no way to prove the ROI of it.
That's interesting. So another person I was talking to for the summit was having that problem. He's a very quant guy, but
Yeah.
then it's like, how do you quantify good PR, or should you quantify that? How about a website redesign? It doesn't look great, but it's not good because we're a B2C brand. And how do you justify that? It sounds like what you're saying is at some point you just need to make that call. You can't quantify it and live with that.
Yeah, I think that's really, really hard. And I mean, if I look a bit into the future and if I want to make a company at some point, that's really hard for me because all of my experience is that, okay, if we have a business problem, let's dissect what the different drivers of success could be. And then we figure out what we can do, 2, 3 things. Let's pick the best one. Whereas these types of things, I think, tend to funnel down from a strong visionary that just says, guys, we have to redesign the site because I think it looks like shit. It just got to be better, right? You're not going to hear it from customers, not even if you ask.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it's not a really useful answer, but I think it has to come from a little bit of attitude.
Yep.
About just raising your standards. This is just not good enough.
Yeah. Somebody's got to be that voice that says, hey, this cannot be the way, and we have to raise our standard for this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us about so we've heard about like the good stuff, any other bad stuff or months where growth was flat? What did your mentality around that look like? How did you get out of it? How did you deal with those difficult times?
Yeah, so I think like we had tons of that. I mean, the thing is, I think now 3, 4 years later, it kind of all fades away. But when I think back, there were definitely times like this. I think what Alexis, our founder, did very well is that for the most part, she would actually shelter us from a lot of this. So she would say, guys, don't look at the revenue. It can be all sorts of things that are hurting that. Keep focusing on things that you promised me, the deliverables. Keep making the inputs. Then it will all be okay. Because trust me, through that journey, all the way up until the last point, there was despair, that there were, a lack of funds, that were, people in and out. There were all sorts of crises. It was messy as hell, even though it might have looked nice and pretty from the outside. But I think what she did exceptionally well is that she sort of said, Simon, you promised me to do X, Y, Z, just fucking do that, and then the rest will be okay. If everybody moves in unison, everything will be okay. But I think, yeah, what mistakes have we made?
So let me just zoom in on that because I think that's really useful. So somebody who might be watching this is in that spot, and the lesson that you would draw from your experiences is focus on the process. If the process is healthy, if the inputs to your system are healthy, kind of ignore or at least don't be emotionally attached to the outcome. Focus on what you can control. Make sure that's getting better, right?
I think so, because in a sense, what you're saying is when you're making a business like an e-commerce business, you're saying that hopefully there is a conceptual viability of the business model. Hopefully, if you had a perfect website and perfect selection and perfect customer service, you would have a really good business. So all you're in a sense doing is that you're trying to find out what are all the obstacles holding me from that end state. And I think if you are helming a business like this, you have a much higher rate of success if you have a very clear idea about how that end state looks like, because it means that you can essentially assess your business day to day and say, where are the deltas in different areas between where I should be and where I am right now. And everybody I hire are essentially just hired to start filling the gaps on certain areas of that, and that becomes a team. And I think that was very much how we drove things, is that both in each team, but also as a company, it was very much, we have set our direction, now we just execute against it.
Right.
Whatever it takes.
Got it. So I want to go back to the growing of Luxola into the acquisition, right? So it sounds like you've got all these channels and they're working well and they're the charts are going the right direction. What did marketing or what did your responsibility look like once it was at, let's say, past the 7-figure a year in sales? So was it just the same thing over and over and then that was it, or did things evolve?
So a very natural, like, two things happened. So first, I was basically a one-man show with a bunch of freelancers in the beginning. So at some point there came a pressure to start finding the right people to help out with these things. So we made a functional team where we would have one SEO analyst, a couple of writers, an influencer marketing analyst that they're actually all with the company now in like fairly senior roles as marketing managers. So that's just awesome to see. And the way we hired them was essentially like for influencer marketing, we put this the influencer dashboard where we had all the rankings. We put that in front of them and said, what do you think about this? To try and gauge, do you think about influencer marketing the same way, or are you somebody who just wants to go to a lot of like press events and go to lunches with speakers, right? For SEO, I still remember sending a case study, which was essentially taking a lot of the stuff from LX Edit with looking at finding out what are the patterns between types of content and their impact, and also a little bit of the same on inbound links to the main e-commerce website. And I sent that out. I think we had 35, 40 people do a case study. Like I was really obsessing over this first hire. And the candidate cadence we had in the end, Joanne, was like her solution just like blew me away. Like to this date, I will not be able to do anything like that in Excel. It took me a while to even understand what she had done. And yeah, she's heading up our SEO now.
How did you make the call that you needed help? Was there you remember, was it just like, okay, I'm way too busy, I can't do anything? Or was it, hey, we've crossed this amount of money in monthly sales or yearly sales, therefore?
So as far as I remember it, as far as I remember, it came from, and this is why Alexis is such an amazing leader, is that throughout these 4 years, she had some kind of insane ability to come and sort of push you now and then and say, hey, Simon, I think you're getting a bit too comfortable. It's time to step up. And then the outcome there would often be, okay, can we find somebody to alleviate some of the lower leverage work that you're doing right now, so you can start doing more? Like, what are the next 3 things you want to work on that can have a higher impact?
Got it.
So we got these people, and then I think the next level after that was to replicate those organizations in the markets where we don't have the same language. So in Indonesia and in Thailand. So we went out there and set up teams as well.
Cool. What about, so shifting gears a little bit, what about people who have, sorry, let me rephrase this question. Luxola was purely an online e-commerce store?
Yeah.
Right, so you guys didn't have any retail locations or anything like that? Okay.
Yeah, at some point, I think we experimented with like pop-up delivery points and Raffles Place at some point, but it was never a huge driver.
Okay, so I'm wondering if you have any input on this question that I was getting, because a couple of people are actually looking forward to seeing your session. So for people who have online and offline businesses, so they've got an e-commerce store and then they've got a retail location, any thoughts about using online marketing to drive sales to the real world store, to the retail location?
Yeah, it's an absolutely amazing driver.
Okay.
I think we noticed this pretty much just straight after integrating our e-commerce with Sephora's retail stores, is that the two just build upon each other in so many ways. And I think what it really starts with is that if you look at the customer journey that we know from online, we are not just tracking the macro conversion point of when somebody transacts, we're also tracking when people see ads, or when they have video views, or when they are on our website without purchasing or adding to basket or whatnot. But I think the level of knowledge that is not so common is how much of that plays into the offline journey as well.
Okay.
If you can get somebody on your website and start using it as a catalog before going into store, you've already won. Like, online, there is access to so many things that are very hard to do in store. Things like reviews, ratings, price comparison, easier to compare products and find the right thing. It's an absolute like.
So the first thing sounds like, think of it as one giant buyer's journey, not 2 separate ones.
Absolutely. The way we look at it is that the transaction is the macro conversion. Everything before that is touch points that should be tracked. So whether it's a store visit or a service we perform on you or whatever, these are all clues to how we can make your journey a little bit easier, a little bit better. And I think the philosophy I took towards this new job about tying together our retail stores and our e-commerce and mobile platforms was really to go around to many different stores all over Southeast Asia and Australia and interview our store staff to figure out where are the journeys, what are the exact customer journeys where you experience a difficulty of sort of generating success for that interaction. So
you would ask the people in the store what the journey was for shoppers.
So I would go and ask store staff, what kind of problems what kind of questions do you get from customers regarding e-commerce that you find it very difficult to help them with? it was essentially saying, we have so and so many customer journeys every week. That means how many people we have in our stores, how many people we have on our websites, how many of those are probably breaking right now.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody sees our website, does that mean that they think automatically that we will have all these products in all of our stores? Okay, well that means they can go into a store and have a really sad experience in there. And it means that the store staff cannot really help them. It's effectively because you don't have the product. So that was really the philosophy, also saying not just how can the marketing drive towards those between the two channels, but also like what are the things that the customer takes for given, since you're the same brand, that you are for some reason not optimizing for because you have a very clustered way of looking at the world.
So what you really did there was some kind of like UX research, like customer development in some way, looking for the insights, and
Yeah.
then
And that to make it like to, and again, it's the same philosophy. So what we did was, we know how many stores we have. If we go and ask 40 different store staff in 4 different countries and 16 different stores, how often do you experience somebody coming to your store and asking for a product you don't have? That means I can do a fair assessment of how often it probably happens across the region.
Mm-hmm.
I can assign a conversion rate of what those interactions would likely have been if we had the product. It's probably fairly high, and hence there is a sort of a missed opportunity assessment there, which can help drive the implementation of the solution to delight the customers better.
Right. So it's we're almost out of time here, but it sounds like it's wrapping the online and offline in the same data tracking, thinking about things from a quantitative perspective. And you're taking that same approach.
Yeah. If I have to sort of point back to one thing that has driven my career so far, it is that the things it takes to get anything done is essentially an idea, an execution plan, and some resources. And when you're in any kind of organization, you can essentially do the first 2 yourself, but the resourcing typically comes from somebody else. So a lot of things comes down to how can you distill what you want to do to the next level or to the decision maker and get buy-in and do quick action. And I think that's what helped for me back in Luxola days, and that what continues to make my days fairly productive now.
Cool. Any books, blogs, podcasts, or resources you'd recommend for people who want to learn about marketing, learn about all the stuff, the skills that you've gained that have been helpful in your career?
So I try and read an hour every day before bed, and I read a couple of different newsletters, but I try and read stuff that has very little to do with my work. So the newsletters I read are things like what the hell is the name of this? I have a financial newsletter that I perhaps I can give you the link afterwards.
Sure.
And you can put it next to the post here. For books, I'm sort of trying to just do everything. So like sort of an obvious mention would be something like Tim Ferriss' Tools of Titans. It's awesome, super actionable. But then I will like try and read the original manuscript of like King Lear the next day and fail at that, right?
That's interesting. So what your approach to learning is to completely look at something that's not related to marketing, so your brain expands? Is that the strategy there?
Absolutely, because I think, I can't remember who told me that the best thing you can study at university is philosophy because it teaches you how to think, and then you'll figure out the rest. And I think since I haven't had the chance to go to university, I'm just trying to do that sort of on my own. So
cool.
Yeah, in a normal week, I will touch anything from like super, let's say, almost junk food writing, very sort of entry level novels, and all the way to like to books about theoretical math and like trying to understand that. Just like keep challenging myself. I have an insane expenditure on the Kindle store, but I've sort of told myself that that's okay. It's probably not the worst thing to spend money on.
Cool. Well, Simon, want to respect your time. Just about out of time here. Where can people go to follow you, or where should we send them if they want to learn more about what you're working on?
So simontorring.com is my blog. I don't think I have written a post in like 1.5 years. I have a bunch of drafts sitting, and it is a goal of mine this year to start posting some. So keep an eye out for that. I'll post some new stuff. Apart from that, like I don't know, friend me on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. I'm always very happy to meet with people, especially in the omni-channel sphere. If somebody is like struggling to integrate a retail with an e-commerce, I am too, and I would love to speak with them.
Cool. Well, we're going to let Simon go. Everybody, thank you for hanging out with us. Make sure to check out all the stuff that Simon mentioned. And for everybody else, we'll see you at the next session. Take care.